Anyways, folks, this post here is about 2 weeks late. And one thing about vlogging, podcasting, it's all about timing. So what I'm about to post is about 2 weeks late because of technical difficulties. So I'm just going to post it now because to me, all thought matters. And it'll make sense when, you have to put all the episodes in chronological order. And again, the only reason why I'm doing this is because to be alive is to communicate. But if certain people refuse to communicate with you, it doesn't mean your need to communicate goes away. Because, communication is healthy. Communication is life. Without communication, there's nothing. So I simply am creating these podcasts because of my need to communicate. And if anyone doesn't understand that, then they're not being sincere. Everyone needs to communicate. Communication is life. So, like I said, if people refuse to communicate with me, it doesn't mean I stop living. Maybe they want me to. Because when people ignore you, basically they're saying, be dead, be gone. That's basically what they're saying. Whether they ignore you for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, they're basically saying, die. Well, so far fate hasn't made that happen yet. So while I'm alive, I'm going to do what's healthy and what is normal, and that is to communicate. And if anyone wants to communicate back with me, pick up the phone. And with that, folks, we're now going to get into episode, I think, 3, which was meant to be posted like 2 weeks ago. So with that, 3, 2, 1, begin. Hello. I like to think of myself as a person of reason, logic, and resolve. And emotions, unfortunately, happen to get in the way of reason, logic, and resolve. If you're a person of reason, logic, and resolve, then trying to deal with someone whose pure emotion will be difficult, if not impossible. The opposite of reason is, according to the online dictionary, is lunacy or insanity, and not necessarily in a clinical sense. And the opposite of logical, among other things, is irrationality or being irrational. Okay? So the opposite of logical is the act of being irrational. Now, the opposite of resolve is to worsen or to destroy, among other things or words that were in that dictionary. Okay? So let me repeat that real quick. The opposite of reason is lunacy or insanity, and not necessarily in a clinical sense. And again, the opposite of logical, among other things, is to be irrational. You have logic on one side and you have irrationality on the other side. And the opposite of resolve, or to have resolve, is to worsen or to destroy, among other things. Because without resolve is the ability to fix a situation. Resolve, let's come together and resolve this issue, or let's resolve, you do it at work, whatever. But without resolve, or the opposite of resolve, is to worsen or to destroy, because that's what happens if there's no resolve. In other words, someone who isn't interested in resolving an issue, no matter how big or small, has decided to pass permanent judgment on that situation or you, or both. That's how a lot of marriages end also. But anyways, for without resolve, or the willingness to resolve, what is there? Disarray, emotional disarray. If someone refuses to resolve an issue with you, then what happens is they tend to fall deep into the abyss of their own mind and begin to fabricate stuff and ideas about you that they convince themselves is true. And without communication, there's no way to disprove that. When someone, it's like, this is what I believe, boom. It happens in politics all the time, but it also happens in family dynamics, friends, whatever. And that truth becomes their personal truth that they must protect in order to feel, quote unquote, right, which starts to fuel one's own ego, which can, in some, become hard as a brick wall. Some people are just simply defending their need to be right, whether they're right or wrong. It's like, no, I want to be right. I want to think that rocks can float, so I don't care what you have to say. Or I want to think that I can jump off this cliff and fly. I don't care what you have to say, because that's my truth. That's just how some people's brains work. And by cutting out outside information, then, like I said, their own truth becomes like a religion, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad analogy. And I bring that up, folks, because that's kind of what I'm dealing with, at least in my opinion. And normally, I wouldn't care. But in this instance, all of the above is affecting the relationship a son, me, has had with my mother since birth. And it's not them I'm describing, rather someone they're in the care of. I can either let it eat me up, or I can just kind of make peace and move on. I mean, nothing is forever anyways. And that's why I write about it, blog about it, make podcasts about it, as a way of diffusing my emotions. Because communication is life. Without communicating, there is no life. And if said person won't grow up and communicate with me for the betterment of the situation, then I'll communicate with the world or whomever. That's how energy works. Energy doesn't just fade or die. It simply finds another route. And with that, I'm going to wrap this short episode up. Until next time, be well, do what's right, and please stay sane and reasonable. Okay, folks, that was the kind of red part of the monologue, a little add-ins here, whatever. But that's basically what it's about, is communication. You don't, just because someone locks you out of their life, it doesn't mean you stop existing. We wrestle with our thoughts daily, weekly, by the minute, every second. And that's why they have microphones. That's why you have YouTube. That's why you have TV. That's why you have books. Because humans, we're born to communicate. So if someone blocks you out of their life, especially when that someone is in care of your mother, then what they're doing is they're turning what should have been or should be a simple situation into a volatile one. For you can't block love. You can't do that. It's and the love that a son has for his mom and vice versa, it's not something that you can't put an object in the way of that. Okay, and all I'm saying is since birth, me approaching my mother, it's never been about politics. My mom was the one place I could go and not have to deal with politics or someone else's emotional hang-up. That was the one safe zone. You all know what I'm talking about because you all have moms and dads and parents or this or that. And usually your mother is your one safe zone, the one place in the galaxy. Even if Darth Vader had a mom, that's probably the only woman that could have cured Vader, man, as if his mother had stayed alive. But your mom is that one place that gives you solace. It's the one place you can approach and go to and speak. And it's that one space where there is no politics, no judgment, no this or that. So yeah, when that space is intruded upon, and when that space that provided you comfort your whole life is suddenly contaminated with politics and other whatever, of course it's frustrating. And that's what I'm dealing with, folks. It all comes down to, I would just like to know. But anyways, okay, we're going to thank you for tuning into this episode. And again, I'm just doing this for my own therapy because I'm alive. And if the people I need to communicate with me won't, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop communicating. Okay? I'm going to communicate until the day I can't. Because that's healthy. And it prevents, if you don't and it stays inside of you, that's just not healthy. So it's better to just get it out. Let it flow out. All right? And anyways, with that, stay tuned for the next episode.